There we go. Buenos dias. All right, that's better. Good morning. It's great to be with you. It's great to be a part of this conference. I was enjoying a lot of the hospitality that Madrid has to offer. It's a very beautiful place. I couldn't be more excited. I hope that you get some time to spend in Madrid. I think you'll enjoy it. I want to talk today about equipping the Academy for the age of mobility, thinking about how devices like this are changing the way that our cultures and our societies and our businesses and our education systems function. As you heard earlier, my name is Saltsman. I'm the director of the Adams Center for Teaching and Learning at Abilene Christian University. We are a teaching, learning, technology center. Our job is to equip faculty with the ability to do new things in the classroom and to think about education in a new way. This is a part of the world that I'm from. This is a little bit of information about our institution. One of the things that we did now in our fourth year is make sure that all of our students and all of our faculty have mobile devices. And we did that originally to try to see what the future would be when students all have smartphones or internet-connected mobile devices. That day is coming very soon, and I think that we've seen a little bit about that. I'm not going to talk so much about what we're doing now, but I want to talk about the why we're doing it. I'm thinking about the why that we're all here together. So, to begin, let's start with the quiz. You came prepared, right? You studied, right? Okay. I'm not getting a lot of confidence out of that. Well, this will be an easy quiz. So the first one is a little bit of history. Two technologies. Which one will win? The tablet or the scroll? The scroll wins, right? So why does the scroll win? Well, think about that. In the tablet, in fact, the tablet was actually a second technology. The first technology was we used to etch those things on the walls of places. And if you wanted to read information, you had to go to the temple in Egypt. And we figured out a way to make papyrus fit on a scroll. And all of a sudden, for the first time in all of human history, information becomes mobile. I could take it with me. We could pack it up and carry it along with us. All right, so here's the next question. The scroll versus the codex. Which one wins? Right? It's the codex, right? But why does the codex win? Let's think about that. It's actually a little more portable. It's more durable. It's got a hard cover on it. Two major technologies come to us with the codex. The first, random access. You could actually turn to page 42. And then you could go backwards to page 28. Wow, that was an amazing technology. And think about this. For the first time in human history, we have search. It's indexed. You have a table of contents. You can move around. You can actually go to the piece of information you want without having to go linearly from the beginning to the end. So now, the question for the 21st century, which one wins? The codex or the tablet? Well, let's think about how this has played out before. Mobility is a really important factor. Search is a really important factor. The ability to incorporate multiple medias, things like photos. Now maybe we could have photos that move. So I think maybe the tablet will win. But you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. This was off of a blog. I really like that. Turns out maybe the rock was better after all. Okay, so if we sit and we look at these technologies, we think about all the types of information that's coming to us. If you haven't seen this, the Horizon report that comes from the New Media Consortium and EDUCAUSE, which is a large educational technology organization out of the United States. It's a very worldwide organization centered in the United States. We look at these kinds of trends that are coming out, and really I think I see three major trends that are happening in mobility. Or happening in higher education. We're seeing a lot of things with rich media. Our students are consuming enormous amounts of rich media. They're creating enormous amounts of rich media. The amount of media that's uploaded to YouTube is just extraordinary, and the amount of time our students are spending on things like YouTube is extraordinary. We're seeing a lot of things with social connectedness. How much time do your students spend in social networking? How many hours a day are they spending in Facebook and other types of social networks? It's how they function. And think about content access, how much access they have with Google and with Wikipedia. I mean, where were those tools when I was trying to go to school? I would have loved to have had those. We had to look stuff up in the encyclopedia. Now it comes to me instantly in a search. And really these things are all converging into mobility because all of those devices, all of those functions now happen in a device that I can carry in my pocket. And I think that that type of thing is going to transform our societies. EDUCAUSE creates, they have a Center for Research called ICAR, and they release this report every year. And this year, they say that students, while they own many types of technology, their clear preference is for small mobile devices that fit in a pocket or a purse, a backpack, something that can go with them. I don't know about your students, but my students look that way. They have an enormous amount of technology in a very small form factor that goes with them everywhere they go. In fact, the 2008 Stanford survey showed that 82% of students who own an iPhone carry it with them to bed. It goes under the covers with them. That's amazing. Well, 87% of students in the ICAR study, this is a very large demographic study, mainly centered in North America, but it extends into the rest of the world. 87% of students in that study own a laptop. Interestingly, 62% own an iPod, but that number is decreasing. It's not gaining as much. And the reason it's not gaining as much is because this number is increasing rapidly. 55% of all of our students in the survey own a smartphone. And this is data that's a year ago. It was collected about a year and a half ago. It was growing at 71% a year, so my guess is this number, 55, is far greater than that now. It's almost as if these students were born with these things. Isn't it? I mean, how early are these children adopting these technologies? You know, I think about this. It's not as if they're born with these. I mean, we're all born the same, but it's what we do when we emerge, and it's the habits and the cultures that we embrace. And this is something that our students have self-selected. I don't remember teaching the class on how to use Facebook, but they picked it up, didn't they? I don't remember about telling them how to do text messaging, but I can tell you as a parent of a 13-year-old daughter, they learn it really soon, and they learn how to do it a lot. It's the technology that they've chosen for themselves. And what are we going to do when that choice and that preference meets us at the academy? Do we just say, check the phone at the door? There's a big box, just deposit it there. If I see it, I'll take it up, turn it off. Or are we going to find a way to use these devices, to use this preference of learning and connection that these students bring with us? So I think a lot about the classroom. Here's a copy of a classroom. This is a 14th century illustration. This is King Henry of Germany doing a lecture in Bologna. So, you know, I look at this and I feel a lot more comfortable about being a teacher myself. You know, if you look at this, you got this guy down here on the bottom sleeping. You know, if you look back here, you've got these people talking. Right here in the middle row, you got this guy kind of checking out the girl next to him. Looks a lot like my classroom. Turns out, even for the King of Germany, this was a problem. Well, so let's think about this. John Medina is a really interesting guy. He wrote a book called The Brain Rules. He's a really interesting fellow, and he's thinking a lot about how the brain works and how the brain functions. And he would say, you know, really the brain appears to be perfectly designed to live in an outdoor, unstable environment where you're in near constant motion. All right, if we look at our family of hunter-gatherers, this is how learning took place for most of human history. right? The son is with the dad going out hunting. The daughter's with the mom around the campfire as they learn to do the types of things that happen. I mean, we are made, our brains are made so that we can survive with all kinds of input from all of our senses. So let's think about the classroom. Let's think about this room. If you're John Medina, he would say that if you wanted to design a learning environment that was diametrically opposed to the way the brain works, you would build this, where you're using pretty much just two of our senses. You're not moving. We're disconnected from many of our senses. So when we think about that classroom, why was that classroom there? How was that classroom invented? Why was it invented? Well, it turns out it had a lot to do with this, the printed book, the written book. If I went back into the 14th century, this is what I would have found, the lecture. What is a lecture? Well, a lecture means to read. A lecture would have been that I have a copy of the book, a very rare copy, one of the only copies of this book that exists in the world. And because the printing press hasn't been invented, the most efficient and effective way, the best technology for me to transfer my information to you was that you would all have blank copies of the book, and I would read for you, word for word, and you would write that down, word for word, until that you all had an exact identical copy of the book that I had. That was what a class was, that's what a lecture was. Then you could take your copies of the book to all the different places in the world, and knowledge is being disseminated broadly. But the printing press comes along. The problem of the first stage was access. If you didn't have a copy of the book, if you didn't have access to a person who had the copy of the book, you had no access to that knowledge. You were without it. But the printing press solves that problem. For the first time, we can mass produce books. In fact, we can mass produce books so much that we begin to have libraries. Places have hundreds of books, more than any student could ever copy, right? We all of a sudden now have libraries that have thousands of books, or tens of thousands of books, or now millions of books. In fact, we have so many different types of books and so many different categories that we have to begin subdividing, right? Now we have majors, and we have disciplines, and we have areas of specialization because we have so much information. But the problem about the first age, the problem with the print age, is finding. Okay, so how many of you remember this technology? Okay, turns out this was a very important technology. We had to spend days learning this technology. Everybody went to library day. We learned how the card catalog worked. This is a very complex apparatus. I mean, you had to know all the things that the librarians called the types of things that you were looking for. There was very specific wording that you could use to be able to find this information. And it took you, wow, maybe hours. If you were doing a thesis or a dissertation, weeks or months just combing through the library. So think about now, in the 21st century, where we have things like Google. Okay, so in a world like Google, I can type in something like educational technology, and this is an old slide. You have to hit the enter button. In the new world, you don't even have to hit the enter button. Google just kind of brings this up automatically, and I find out that I have 53.1 million hits in 0.23 seconds. Okay, we're going to do an exhaustive lit review. Begin reading now. Turns out that if you spent 5 seconds on each one of those returns, that's more information than you could consume in your lifetime, and it was brought to you in 0.23 seconds. How much did that cost you? Almost nothing. It's effectively free. In fact, you can go down to the public library and it is free. How much of that information is very useful? Well, it turns out not a lot. What we live in today looks a lot like the Matrix. What's real? What's not? What can I know? What is being falsely fed to me? The challenge of the age that we live in today is assessing all of this information. Of all of those 53.1 million hits, How many are credible? How many are original? How many are authoritative? How many have bias? How do I understand bias? How do I understand authority? Those are really great questions. That's the questions that I need to be a consumer of information in the 21st century. And I ask you, what are we as the Academy doing to equip our students with the ability to do that? How are we as professionals modeling how to look at the information that we find and sort through that information that we find and understand the information that we find within those contexts of original source, authoritative source, and bias? I think that when students leave my classroom and they go out into the working world, they're not likely to call me up and ask me what I think about the information that they find. I think that if I don't equip them to do that, then they may be misusing the information or misunderstanding the information. I think these are the most critical skills for our students in the 21st century. So as a teacher in this world, if I imagine that my primary job is to just give them more information, I'm going to add to that 53.1 million. Am I helping them? Or am I making the job worse? If I imagine my job as a teacher to say, I know that all of that exists out there. I want you to listen to any of that. I want you to listen to what I say because I know what's best. And all of that stuff that's on the internet that's just sheer rubbish, I'm the person that has all the authority and all the credibility. Am I helping or hurting my credibility? What are my students more likely to believe? Turns out that they're more likely to believe the wisdom of the masses than the wisdom of the expert. It shows up time and time again in our research. If thinking about all of this information and all of this complexity of sorting through that, is my job as a teacher less necessary or more? But am I doing that job is the question that I continue to ask myself. So let's think about where this technology is going. Ray Kurzweil is an inventor, a futurist, an amazing guy. He's written a number of books, and you know, he really talks about technology growing in an exponential way. I love the Did You Know videos and those types of things. They talk about exponential growth. I'm touched a little bit in that. He says, and he accurately predicts this extremely well, that technology will increase 1 billion-fold in the next 25 years. I want you to think about the technologies that you have in your pocket, the technologies that you have in your backpack or your purse. Think about a device like this. And increase that 1 billion-fold. I can't do that. My brain can't compute 1 billion. But that's the technologies that my students will be carrying around in their pocket or purse. So let's think a little more about that. Let's get a little more specific, right? About the information that we find on the internet, the first supercomputer that equaled a human brain, right? 20 billion megaflops. That's a lot of computing power, and we were able to build one of those. Took an enormous amount of money and an enormous amount of time. In 2023, you'll be able to go down to your local store and buy one of those. It'll just be what you use as a laptop, right? By 2037, it'll be worth a penny. I love this, right? By 2059, a time in which our students will still be in their careers, they'll be able to buy that computing capacity of the entire human race for less than a cent. If that's, you know, UK pounds, that's even cheaper than that, right? So let's think about all the information that's out there, right? In 2009, the latest information that I could get from the EMC Corporation, there were 800,000 petabytes. That's 1 billion gigabytes of information. How much is that? Well, it turns out if you were going to back up the internet, you said, hey, you know, I want to back up the internet in case somebody hits the delete button, and you were going to do your duty for all of society. You go down to the store and you buy a pack of DVDs. Remember, these are the DVDs, the big, thick ones, better than the CDs. Those don't hold enough anymore. So you take your DVDs and you start making backups. All right, and you put one in and you stack it up and you take another one and you stack it up. Turns out by the time you backed up the internet, your stack of DVDs would go from here to the moon and back. 2 stacks of DVDs all the way to the moon. That's a lot of information. How am I supposed to deal with that information? How am I supposed to find anything in that? Well, and it's growing exponentially, right? It's not going to double, it's going to grow exponentially, right? So by 2020, 25 quintillion pieces of information. This isn't bits or bytes, these are actual things that you find. This is literally finding a speck of sand on a seashore. And it's going to take that type of computing power that we saw to be able to sift through all of those specks of sand to find the one that we need. All right, and it's growing every 18 months, and it's just moving more rapidly. So the question that I ask is, when should we or could we expect these types of emerging devices to be required learning resources? Will we just expect that every student shows up with that? Turns out we haven't always expected students to show up with a pen and paper. Turns out we haven't always expected students to show up. But when are we going to expect things like these that will be embraced in technology? I think those days are soon, and I think it's our generation that's going to help bring those to bear, but I think it's the next generation that's truly going to understand how that works, because I think these are technologies that are so much of their generation. So what's holding us back? Why haven't we done this sooner? What is it about these technologies that has prevented us? Well, prevented us from adopting them. And I'd say one thing, I think our technologies are pretty crude. We don't have very sophisticated educational technologies yet. Many of you are inventing those. You're helping those become more sophisticated. But the other thing I think is that many of our tools are just broken. They don't work right. At least they don't work right in the world that our students understand. And this is the world that our students understand. The fact that Amazon knows more about my educational interest than my own university student information system. In fact, Amazon knows a lot about my educational interest, and it knows a lot about everyone else's educational interest, and it can put all those together to help me find things. For instance, if I search on a book, it knows how to find all these other books that people who are also interested in that book were interested in. It also knows a lot about me. It knows how to say, hey, I'm going to suggest things just for you based on all of the things that you've ever purchased, all the things that you've ever read. It's a very sophisticated learning tool to help me discover things that I haven't yet discovered. It knows what I've got, it knows what I'm missing, and it knows how to fill in the blanks. That's a great learning tool. That's what I try to do as a teacher, and that does it by looking at millions and millions of records and millions of transactions to complete that. What will technologies look like? What will these types of technologies look like? I think that we're going to see technologies that know our educational history. In the United States, there's a great debate going on right now about the idea of a health record, right? A universal digital health record that says everything that's ever been done to me, everything that I've ever, every illness I've ever had, every inoculation I've ever had. Why don't we have that for education? Why don't we have something that says this is what the students have mastered? This is what the student hasn't. And as a teacher, I would have the ability to look and see how every student individually has performed throughout their career. I want to know what that student's goals are. How can I, as a teacher, help my student individually achieve the goal that he or she has set for themselves? I want to know something that tells me of my students' intellectual interest and curiosities and their learning preferences, how they like to learn, so that I can feed them information in the form that they would rather consume it by. I want something that allows my students to reflect on things, to see the work that they did as freshmen, and to see the work they did as seniors, and understand the difference, and see their growth. You know, learning takes place really slowly, but it's not until we reflect that we can see how far we've moved in such a short period of time. I think about the challenges of adaptive testing and adaptive information. If I already know this stuff, don't spend your time testing me on it. Test me on things that really challenge me. Give me information that I haven't seen. right? Right now we're moving everybody through in this factory model where it's an assembly line and everyone gets identically the same things. But I think that as individuals, we ought to think maybe a little bit more about how we can give them individualized content through adaptive testing and adaptive information. I think about something that helps me find connections through social technologies. I think about how we're going to interface with teachers through these technologies. But what's the other thing that's holding us back? And I think it's ourselves. That we're not quite as sophisticated as we need to be. But that's what conferences like this are about. Conferences that help us become more sophisticated, to help us grow. Conferences where we reach out to each other and try to share the great things that we're learning. So as I conclude, I want to leave you with this slide. How many of you stayed at a hotel last night? How many of you saw a sign like this that was on the room? It said, this room is equipped with an Edison electric light. Do not attempt to light with the match. Simply turn a key by the wall or door. It's kind of funny now, right? Because we're from the electricity generation. But you know, if you went back a couple 100 years ago, for all of human time, if you wanted light, you started a fire. Fire equaled light. That was always true. And for the first time, humanity had a way of having light without having fire. We had to teach ourselves to reach for the switch instead of lighting a fire. And that's where we are today in education. We're having to think about how technology is changing the way, the things that we've always known. This has always been true. And in one generation's time, it will never be true again. This is something else, the very small print, which I'm sure that you can't read. It says that the use of electricity for lighting is no way harmful to health, nor does it affect the soundness of sleep. It was pretty scary. These electrons pulsing through the walls, I can't see them. They're going to give me cancer. It was scary. We had to become comfortable with that. I think that's where we are today, too. As our technology advances, we have to become comfortable with that as well. So I hope that you use this conference to explore these new technologies, to explore these new ways of doing things, to think differently about how we've always done things in the past. That's what this conference is about, and I'm happy to join you. Thank you very much.